Honestly, when I meet families and I talk to kids and their parents, I always say everybody has terrible communication skills because nobody has learned how to communicate. And so I always like to start working with communication using I statements. So
Welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. This is a show presented by Heart and Solutions Counseling Agency. We release new episodes every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central and encourage you to batch up that laundry, put away the dishes, plan for the week ahead, or do any other task that might seem daunting while you give our show a listen. You might just be encouraged to call your therapist, connect with this week's guest, or seek out those services you've been considering for a while but haven't made the commitment to yet. If you are in the state of Iowa and are in need of mental or behavioral health counseling, give us a call at 1-800-531-4236. Enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. My name is Dr. Julie Johnson. I'm the president and founder here at Heart and Solutions, Mental Health Counseling and Behavioral Health Counseling.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt. I am our vice president in charge of the behavioral health department. And this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So we are designed for people curious about counseling but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
So our guest today is a BHIS supervisor in our Cedar Rapids office. She has been doing BHIS in the Cedar Rapids area here with us at Heart and Solutions in Iowa, and has recently been promoted into a BHIS counselor or BHIS supervisor. So we're really excited to welcome her into leadership this week, and to get to interview her on this podcast. So we're gonna hear about different BHIS techniques. What is behavioral health? What is behavioral health intervention? What's it like to be a behavioral health intervention counselor? What's it like to get behavioral health intervention services for your children? And then also our guest today has some expertise in suicide prevention. And we are coming out of Suicide Prevention Month. We want to make sure that we are talking about suicide prevention, self-harm prevention techniques that we might be able to use or seek out if we find that we're feeling some suicidal ideation or some thoughts of self-harm. So welcome to the show. We've got Brianna Banowetz with us today.
thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Welcome. So can you tell us a little bit about what your role here? So what is a BHIS provider or BHIS counselor? What is BHIS? And then also, what is a BHIS supervisor?
Yeah, so BHIS stands for Behavioral Health Intervention Services, and then you add the P on the end for providers. So I'm a BHIS provider. I work with kids between the ages of 4 to 18. And these kids can be battling anything from ODD to ADHD, needing help with conflict resolution skills, organizational skills, basically anything across the board. I can help kids work through their battles. The younger generation of kids that are entering into elementary, middle school, high school, they've had a lot of technology and they have a lack of communication skills. Honestly, when I meet families and I talk to kids and their parents, I always say everybody has terrible communication skills because nobody has learned how to communicate. And so I always like to start working with communication using I statements. So working to break those down and help them learn how to talk about their feelings, talk about why they're feeling that way, and talk about what they can do with that feeling. So how can we express that we're mad? How can we express that we're happy? We all have visual cues that may show that we're happy or sad or mad, but it doesn't necessarily come across that way in the right way sometimes. So working with my clients and helping them be able to express those concerns to their parents, and then also turning around and having their parents work with them and how they can communicate to their child, because kids are smarter than we let them, but that we think that they are. So you always kind of got to treat them like they're a little bit older than they are. it builds that a little bit of respect, and it kind of removes that authority figure going on, which a lot of my clients struggle with authority. I think that comes from the ODD, which is oppositional defiant disorder. I didn't say that before. But yeah, so as a BHIS counselor, I work with kids and their families and just try to help them get through any battles they're going through. We set goals. So there's 3 goals we work on throughout a 3-month period time, and those continue on. Sometimes they're never 100%. Sometimes they go from 5 to 50%, and that's a huge change in their families, and they notice that change. And even a 5 to 6%, those little bits of percentages that we work through, the families notice and they appreciate that, and they start working through those as well outside of the BHIS sessions, which happen 2 hours a week. I like to see my kids 1 hour in school and 1 hour at home. I believe that individual time at school is a huge part of the process. That's usually when my kids open up the most to me. They tell me some stories that they're not comfortable to tell their parents, which sometimes I don't want to hear, but then my kids trust me a lot, so I hear about those things. As well as the 1 hour at home, you get to talk to the family. I think it's really important to build a bond with the parents and the siblings as well as the client, because then the client sees that you are trying to essentially be a part of the family and you're trying to help everyone. You're not just there helping the client. And I use client and kids kind of as the same, because once you get a caseload of clients, you really get to bond with them and you get to know them. And so they're not just my clients, they're my kids. I look to them as much as I can help them and do whatever I can for them. So as a BHIS provider, that's kind of an overview, I would say, of that role. And then the more technicality of it is planning interventions and activities to do with each of your clients. So for example, this week, since it's spooky season, it's October, I am doing an activity with my older clients where we are drawing 5 ghosts. And I have a couple clients that really like to draw. And so they spend like a lot of time drawing the ghosts. And then I have a couple that don't care what they're drawing, and it's just like a little blob. And then inside of each of the ghosts, they come up with 5 things they want to ghost, so to get rid of in their life. And we have anything from them talking about people that are toxic to them, anything from, spending money, not getting enough sleep. And then we kind of just talk about it and break it down. And we're like, oh, okay, well, why do we want to ghost this person? Why is this person having a negative effect on our life? Or is it something that can be fixed? Like, can we talk about how we can learn forgiveness, or is it something you can't forgive? And then for my younger clients this week, we're doing a paper pumpkin activity. So they're given 5 slips of paper, and then on the slips of paper, they write something that I kind of decide when I work with the client. So yesterday we wrote down 5 coping skills, and the client either drew it out or wrote it down, and then you fold it into like little papers. The papers like go like this, and then you make a little pumpkin out of it. Another client, we did 5 things that make us happy, because he tends to be a little more on the anger side of life. So we found 5 things that make him happy, and those were Fortnite, hugs from his mom, those type of things. So it's really exciting for them to talk about this as well as do the craft. So that's I think the most fun part of the job, is coming up with those ideas and being really creative about it. I think that's a relatively good summary of the BHIS provider position. In regards to the supervisor position, I am a novice. I started technically Monday, but I have been shadowing interviews. I conducted my first interview last Friday, and have started like emailing applicants, as well as I have been networking throughout the BHIS provider role, which I didn't know, but that's a huge part of the role. Networking is how you get your client caseload. But also networking will be a huge part of being a supervisor as well, because I want to be able to bring clients to my providers, as well as it's a part of their job to do that themselves. So I've been doing some networking and just kind of getting familiar with the role. So I don't really have a lot of information about it, but I'm really excited to do the position. And I think it's a great way to become more of a leader and have an impact on this company.
Awesome. Yeah, those are some cool activities. How do you think of those, or know like what type of activities would be more beneficial towards one client or another?
For sure. So like I said, those goals that I talked about at the beginning, I like to use them as kind of an outline. So like imagine you're writing a paper. Those are my outlines. And if I'm ever stuck and I don't know what to move forward with on a client, I pull up those goals and I check over them. Otherwise, I go off of the parents and what they're struggling with and what the client is doing. Like I said, that bond with the parents is a huge part of the role because the parent is going to be the one expressing their concerns as well as listening to the client, but turning around what the parent is struggling with. So, for example, one of my clients last week, he was being very argumentative when he's asked to do something. So he was asked to put his backpack away. No, I don't want to do that. Well, can we pick up the toys? No, I don't want to do that. So we kind of worked through a way that he can calm himself down when he doesn't want to do something after his mom has asked him multiple times to do it. And so that's why we did the coping skills this week, because we kind of role played a couple coping skills last week when I was with him. And his favorite thing is hand breathing, where you like breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. So we like worked through that, and he like wrote that down as his favorite coping skill yesterday. As well as like I have a binder just full of random things and activities. And so if I am ever at a spot where I don't know where to move forward with a client, I just like will look through my binder, think what I have, and then we'll do something relating to that. So the key of mistakes is probably my favorite thing I've been using recently, because I have a lot of clients who are starting to change their mistakes to choices. And I like to say, once you repeat a mistake multiple times, it now becomes a choice and you are deciding to move forward and do that. And so we talk about the key of mistakes, which is reflect, detect, and I can't remember the third one. It all rhymes though, but it basically gives the client a chance to think about what they did, can they change it, and what can they do to change it, as well as how it affected their past and their present. And so that's a big thing I pull out of my binder all the time to talk to my clients about. As well as the whole other side of this is every week on Mondays, after I'm done doing my notes, which is another part of the BHIS provider job, is writing notes on every session you do. I sit down on Pinterest, and I love Pinterest a lot. It gives me a ton of ideas. And so I will scroll through Pinterest looking up specific things, and I like to theme my activities. So I will look at like what's going on like that week or like this month, and kind of talk about with my clients like what can we do with that. So we did like a matching emotions and pumpkin activity earlier this month. I guess last week because it's still October. Or I'll look through and find different activities. So I've been really focusing on responsibility with my older clients and talking about how we make responsible decisions. What does responsibility mean to us? What does it mean to the parents? And have them express what they feel is responsibility. And so I did like a little worksheet, which I try to stray away from. But this was more of a review for the clients to work through a situation and then identify whether or not the person was responsible and so on, as well as like coming up with an activity to break down the steps of making a responsible decision. And then it's really just kind of, I look at Pinterest, I get a few ideas, and then I make them my own. And so a lot of the things like Valentine's Day, we made hearts. So like the little candy hearts, we made them out of paper, and I had different clients do different things. So maybe positive affirmations, coping skills, like for example, the things that make us happy. Support system, you make Valentines for your support system. It really is based on what that client is going through. So if I have a client who is more full of anger than my other ones, definitely talking about those coping skills and how we can calm ourselves down. If I have somebody who doesn't really have a lot of people in their life or a lot of family figures, we would talk about the support system and see and have them notice how many people they have by their side. As well as, I have another client who struggles with body image and is not confident per se. And so we talk about positive affirmations. We really force those, because the more you tell yourself these good things, the less negative thoughts are pushing through. So I really just change it based on what my client is going through, what they're struggling with. And so, yeah. And just honestly using Pinterest to come up with those basic ideas and then making them my own.
Gosh, I mean, it's so fun to be in a BHIS session. If you're a child, if you're a parent or a guardian, it should be fun to be in a BHIS session. These are such fun activities where, yeah, we're having a lot of fun. and we're also feeling productive, right? We know that, okay, this is a fun craft to do, and we're working on our coping skills, or we're doing our breathing as we go, and we're using those real-time interventions as we're seeing them happen at home or at school. So I think that is so important, and such a difference when we talk about, when people hear the word counseling, a lot of times they think about therapy. And so it's such an important distinction with BHIS. And BHIS is so necessary in so many situations because of that individual dynamic and the family dynamic. And you're supporting that entire family system in the ways that they're communicating with each other. I think that is so important with BHIS. And I love what you said about, nobody's born with communication skills. Like we're terrible. When we're born, if we're hungry, we cannot say, hey, I'm starting to get a little hungry, or hey, I'm starting to get a little hangry. Can't say that to people. We have to just scream at the top of our lungs, right? And if we don't learn as we go, either from modeling, from watching other people express that they're hungry, oh, that person said that they were hungry and got food and didn't get in trouble while they were doing it, right? Okay, that's a model. That's something I can look at and see. And we don't all have these models. They're never, other than BHIS, they're really not taught to us the way that we're taught math. So if we think about math, I might see my parent or guardian take money out of the bank, right? Or I might see them grocery shopping, and I go, oh yeah, they're giving money for this food, right? But unless somebody is specifically teaching me math, I'm never going to learn math by watching other people. And it's the same way with communication, because I can learn ways that work. So I can learn that, yeah, screaming when I'm hungry, or just getting to the point where I'm so grumpy that like nothing makes sense to me, or I don't want to do anything, being able to, we might learn that, like, yeah, being grumpy might tell people that I'm hungry, right? Like yelling at somebody that person might be able to pick up on that and be like, oh, let's get a snack. But the more effective way, the faster way, right? The better way for me to get my needs met as a child is to learn and practice saying the words, Mom, I will do that, but I am so hungry right now. I'm feeling lightheaded, right? And that is so necessary and so empowering for that child. So I just love that and those examples there as well. And you are also very passionate about suicide prevention. And we had in September, we had Suicide Prevention Month, and we'd love to hear some tips and tools that you have gone over with your clients as well, so that they can understand what suicide is, what self-harm is. I think sometimes our society doesn't want to talk about self-harm, and does it, especially when it comes to our children. And I think society's a little more open to talking about it with teenagers, but not as open to talking about it with children. And a lot of that ideation, a lot of that learned helplessness that kind of starts very, very young. So being able to talk about, our worth as humans, and our connection with other people is suicide prevention as we're younger. So we'd love to hear some of that from you too.
Yeah, for sure. I'm so sorry. My dog is using a squeaky toy right now. But yes, suicide prevention is such a hard topic to talk about, especially with young adults and children. Before we even get into this, I always let the client's parents know that I will be talking to their child about this. It is important to educate them, because if they're educated, there's no questioning, there's no wondering what's going on. And so for my younger clients, I did introduce suicide to them, and we talked about it, as well as my older clients who have had a few actually talk to me about their suicidal ideations, or other people who they have heard say these things like, I want to kill myself. And so the most important thing about suicide is letting people know who they have around them and who's there for them. Because when somebody has these suicidal thoughts and feelings, they oftentimes feel very alone, or they're fighting something that they don't know how to get past. And so their way of getting out of it is to take their own life. And so really talking about it brings awareness to reasons why somebody might do it. And I think a lot of the times when somebody does pursue it, people tend to be selfish about it. Well, they didn't know who they were hurting, or why would they do that to me? What did I do wrong? Like, maybe it's not about you, it's about them. That's why it happened. And so kind of talking about those things, and not necessarily having such a negative association with it. Of course, it's a terrible thing that can happen to someone. However, this was their way of escaping what was going on. This is their way of taking away their pain, not trying to hurt other people. That's not their goal. And so with this subject, I opened up and just asked my clients, do you know what suicide is? And a lot of the time I'll get responses of no, or yes, this is my experience with it. This is this person who said something to me about it. Yeah, I felt that way sometimes. And so then I kind of break it down, and I have the PowerPoint that I thought was really helpful and helped guide that conversation, because it is a hard conversation. And sometimes you can talk about different aspects of it, but until there's something in front of you and the client can read that is at the same time that you're telling them, I think it goes through a little easier than just struggling with understanding what it is. So if you want to pull that PowerPoint up, we'll kind of talk about that, and I'll point out the things that I noted and kind of overlooked when I went through it, because these are teenagers and younger clients. So they don't have the best attention span, and I'm not here to sit in BHIS sessions to give them lectures and slides, because they go to school all day for it. So yeah, so at the beginning of the slides, they just have some tips for presenting. Like I said, that I don't give like a formal presentation for this. It's more so me and my client just looking through the slides. So you can go ahead and scroll down, please. So this first test your suicide prevention knowledge slide, we went through and asked these questions. So what are 3 critical warning signs of suicide? True or false? You should never ask someone if they're thinking about suicide. And what are 3 ways to help someone who is having suicidal thoughts? And then name at least 2 suicide prevention resources that are available 24/7. And so the one that I should say, pounded in my client's head is 988. They won't remember the 1-800 number. I don't remember the 1-800 number, but they can remember 988. And it was very exciting, because as I went through this slideshow with some of my clients, they were like, yeah, I have that in my phone already. And I was like, that's amazing. That's great. I love it. You know that you have a resource with you all the time if you have your phone on you. And then asking these other questions, is it preventable? How do I know someone might be suicidal? What can I do to help if I'm concerned about someone? What resources are available? And how do I cope with the loss after suicide? So I'll go ahead a little bit more down, please. So words matter. Talking about suicide is something that we don't like to talk about. So I really emphasize this slide alone and saying that we don't want to say committed suicide, because it makes it sound like it's a crime or that they did something wrong or illegal per se. And then also using the word successful or unsuccessful. It's not a success to, take one's life. And so we want to use died by suicide or take their own life, as well as attempted suicide. And emphasizing this slide so that when my clients are talking about it, they feel better about what they're saying, because I don't like saying committed suicide. I don't think other people would like to say that. And so what are the causes? I did emphasize this slide as well, because it's not, like it says, not one factor that goes into someone wanting to take their own life. And so there are risk factors. On the next slide, I did read this whole slide. I think this is the only slide I read everything on, like with paragraphs. And so I emphasized on this slide that people who are suicidal do not want to die as much as they do not want to go on living with their pain. So I kind of talked about this earlier, that there's something that this person doesn't feel that they can overcome or they can get through. And like I said, having people through your life that can help you, knowing that can help you get through that pain. But when you're overwhelmed with it, sometimes the only way you feel you can get out is by taking your life. And so this is a slide that I broke down to my clients and really exhausted them on. This is a part of the reason why someone would do it. And so then the next slide is just kind of breaking down what can be done to prevent suicide. So knowing those warning signs, asking directly, are you thinking about suicide? Making a safety plan, and reducing access to lethal weapons or means. And then the connection to a mental health professional, which I always emphasize to my clients. I am a mental health professional. I can help you through this. Like, please reach out to me if you need anything. And then creating a system to respond to suicide risk in the least restrictive way. And so talking about warning signs and risk factors on the next slide, I gave examples for my clients as what the difference is between warning signs and risk factors. So having them understand that warning signs are specific behavioral or emotional cues that may indicate suicidal intent, versus risk factors are conditions or circumstances that may elevate a person's risk of suicide. So risk factor would be having those lethal means around them, and a warning sign is going to be the behaviors of them, maybe being really super depressed, or maybe them even expressing that they don't feel good and they don't know what to do about it. So kind of emphasizing what the difference between this is. And then on the next slide, it breaks down risk factors. And a lot of the times I had my clients commenting on the percentages. And so they were kind of shocked that, criminal legal problems is only 9% of suicidal risk in those factors. And so talking about this and kind of having them be aware of the different situations that may be part of those risk factors was really important to breaking down why someone might do it or how we can help someone. So if you know someone is having struggles with their physical health, maybe they broke a bone or they can't do everything they used to do, this could be a risk factor for it. And then talking about the different groups that are impacted by suicide. And I always asked my clients, like, are you a part of any of these groups? And they'd be like, well, yeah, I'm a boy. Or no, I'm not. I don't relate to any of these. And so just kind of having them, acknowledge what's going on. This next slide, I did read this to them, just kind of breaking it down because it's important that they have this knowledge and are able to help other people they know who may be in the LGBTQ community. And so the next slide, protective factors. So this is probably one of my favorite slides. This is a really good presentation. If you can't tell, I really enjoy doing this with my clients. So I really like this slide because I had my clients also, after we read through it, I had them go back and choose things that they had protective factors for. So they all were in behavioral health care. That's what I did with them. And so that was one, I'm like, you guys have me, I'm here for you, as well as we noted any other therapists they may see, their doctors, those type of things. And then connectedness to individuals, family, community, and social institutions. So a lot of my clients attend church. And so that was one of their big things, or just acknowledging their friends, their families, and people who they are connected to. Life skills. So most of the time this one was like, well, I don't have coping skills or I don't have problem solving skills. And I was like, well, guess what? We work on them. So I always wrote that down and told them, like, well, what did we do last week? Or what have we worked on before? And have them, think about it and then remember, well, yeah, I guess I do have coping skills. I can take a deep breath. Self-esteem and a sense of purpose or meaning in life. This one was really hard for my clients to acknowledge. And I just kind of broke down, like, what are you doing here? Why are you here? Well, you go to school, yeah, so you're learning at school. That's a purpose in your life, is to learn and know things and, reach your full potential. And so talking about those things and self-esteem and talking about great things about ourselves. this slide was a huge part of this because I wanted my clients to know and be aware of everything they have in their life, these positive parts, so that if they ever do feel suicidal, they can kind of think back to maybe this presentation. Maybe they won't think back, but they could. So the next slide, talking about critical warning signs. And so I broke this down as well. This was an important part because we want to be aware and know what might be those warning signs. So we talked about the risk factors. Well, what is the warning sign? So threatening to hurt or kill oneself, making plans for oneself, and finding a way that they would do it. And then posting, writing, talking about it, as like death, suicide, self-harming, any of those things. Those are critical warning signs. So what are some other warning signs of suicide? So this slide breaks down a whole bunch of different ones. And a lot of the times when I read this slide, I noted that it is okay to feel this way. Everyone in the world has felt withdrawal or isolation. Everybody has felt the feeling of hopelessness or worthlessness. It's just a part of our human mental health. It's what we battle and what we have to work through. However, why these are on the page is because you would notice an increased I lost my words, having more of a, you notice it more. They're having increased behaviors of these things. So they're sleeping a lot more, or they are increasing their substance use. And so you would notice these changes and they might be more persistent. And so that's when we want to look at these warning signs as potential critical warning signs for another person or yourself. And so a lot of the times I talked about my clients like, hey, have you ever felt this way? Well, do you feel it a lot or a little? And like, what does that look like? And so kind of having them think about, well, like, yeah, I guess that could be a reason if I was feeling that way all the time. Knowing the signs, this slide I kind of skimmed over because we talked about it on the previous one for most part. I spent a lot of time on the previous slide. This one, I really noted the story on it. So the little like Polaroid picture on the side talks about a guy who has a friend over and he is showing the friend his house and he is showing him where his important money is, his important documents, his keys, his will, all of those things. And so that is a critical warning sign in this situation because he's young. He should not be technically planning to die soon. And so that is a warning sign that he's trying to give away his possessions. And that is something that a lot of people who are planning to take their own life will do because they want people to have their belongings and they want someone to take care of it for them. And then the next part of this slideshow is talking about it. And so it gives you two options. You ask a person directly, are you thinking about taking your own life? And they say yes or no. And so this basically breaks down the best way to do it. So having a safe environment, having time to talk to the person, being prepared with resources, kind of etc. And then starting the conversation, this was 3 examples. I didn't read these with my clients. Instead, I came up for an example specifically for them and what I would talk to them about, and then have them also start a conversation with me about it. Hey, I noticed you have been extra tired during your sessions lately. What's going on? And then starting it with that. And then the next slide, talking about it's okay to be direct. This is something you don't want to beat around the bush with. You want to be there to help the person. And if you're not being direct, you're not going to get a direct answer. And so the next slide talks about more questions that they may go through that you can talk to a person with. I think one of the most notable ones on here is talking about what is the pain? What is your pain? What are you feeling the most that you're struggling with? And then the next 2 slides kind of say if they say no or if they say yes. So if they say no, you want to encourage them to talk about what's going on. You talk about resources. You kind of just give them that base level. Well, like here's everything you might need if you do feel this way. And so if they say yes, this is where we're going to take it seriously. We remain calm. We want to be that supportive figure for them. And so talking about those resources again, talk about why they're feeling this way. Is there anything that you can do to help them? encourage them to get help, all of those. And so then the next slide recaps all of what was kind of summed up before. So the main part of this slide I like to note is ask directly, express your concern, let them know somebody else is noticing that something's going on. And then finding the words to talk to them. So that's that difficult conversation. And then if you sense something is wrong, don't delay in getting help. And so that was something else that we talk a little bit more further down. And so safety plan, I ignored this slide completely. And I talked about the safety plan that we have for our clients within the company. And a lot of times I'd pull that out and we would talk about it and go through it. And kind of they acknowledge, what are your coping skills? That's the first step in ours. What are your coping skills? What can you do right now? The second step, writing down all of these people that you can call, you can ask for help. And then the third part, acknowledging those resources that you can have. And so the suicide prevention line is on here. The crisis text line is on here. That 988, which isn't on the presentation at all. That's the easiest way to remember it. So that's what I pushed. And then the next two slides talk about getting help. And so whether or not you should call 911 and whether or not you should call a crisis line. So should you call 911? I summed up this slide when I talked to my clients, but my main point with it was that, are they harming themselves right now? Are they harming you? Are you in the way of harm? And that's when you want to call 911. If you have somebody who is just really upset, they don't have a weapon or lethal means, you can call those crisis lines. They are meant to sit there and help these people and go through what they're feeling, rather than 911 is going to be there to protect, right? That's what we call 911 for. And so kind of knowing the difference between those and emphasizing, different situations of how someone might feel and what's the best way to go about it. And so I just kind of summarized these. It's a lot of words, so my clients are definitely like, more, and I'm like, nope, I got this. Like, we're just gonna go through it. And then a little further down, I did review this green slide because it just broke down the steps again. And then the next part is basically coping skills and what you can do to help prevent it. So we talked about these, deep breathing, always emphasize that. And then after this, I don't really talk about anything more with the clients because it's for parents, caregivers, specific things. If the parent is in the room during this conversation, I would pull them over and have them be like, hey, let's just skim over this. I want you to look at it. But basically, my client doesn't want to hear all this stuff. It's a little bit of repetitiveness, but also really informational for a parent. So that's kind of what I did with this slide. And a lot of the times my clients would ask questions throughout this, or they would have their own stories to tell. And something that I want to note, because it is kind of nerve-wracking to talk about this topic to younger children, is that I shared this slideshow within our company, and someone responded saying that one of their younger kids had expressed these suicidal ideations and wanting to take their own life. And so starting younger than you would think is going to be more helpful, because then they're educated. They know the resources. They know what they can do to help. They know who they have in their life to help them and be a support for them. And so, yeah, this conversation was not necessarily fun to have with my clients, and not necessarily something that they expected me to come to a BHIS session with, because a lot of the times it is fun games and playing around and just having fun and, sliding in those skills and goals in without them even knowing. But this was something serious that I did want to break down with my clients.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important. And I love the idea of using this slideshow in that session. So this slideshow is from www.suicidispreventable.org. I know there's a lot of other resources there too. Going through it kind of in this structured way, right? Like you said, BHIS is usually pretty open, right? And flexible. And yeah, oh, we feel like playing with Legos today. Yeah, let's do that, right? Let's do some skills using that. But being able to, because it's a very important topic and because it's a very serious topic with so much stigma surrounding it, right? There's so much emotion, there's so much history for so many people, and there's so much fear that comes into discussion about suicide and suicide prevention, self-harm and self-harm prevention. So when we're going through it, having the slides and being able to say, okay, we are going through these are from this credible source, and we are going to step right through these slides so that they have the information, and they also can reference the slides at a later time if they want to. But I love what you're saying about, yeah, it doesn't matter how old that child is. Honestly, there are ways you're not sitting here reading to them. If you have ever been in this, like, you're not sitting there reading it to them. If you were going through this with a 6-year-old, there is a 6-year-old way to explain this to that child, and having the parents be involved and available during that time really, really helps for that child to understand that, oh, okay, my BHIS counselor is saying these things to me about how I can help myself if I'm having these thoughts or feelings, how I can help other people. And my parents are right here, and they're okay with having this conversation. Even that at 6 years old, even if they don't remember any of the information, but they remember that I had a conversation and my parents were involved and they were okay having that conversation with that BHIS counselor. Even just that means that, okay, in 8 years when they're 14, right, they've got that experience in their mind. And when it comes to, oh man, I'm not feeling okay, right? I'm feeling more like I want to isolate. I'm feeling like, some hopelessness during the day. That opens that door to have that frame of reference of like, oh no, my parents talked about this. Like, this is okay to bring up. This is okay to share and talk about with my parents. And I know that they've had this information and they have a framework for what they're going to do. And if the parents are showing engagement with this and going, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Let's do that. Then it makes it that much easier for that child to be able to say, okay, I know what's going to happen if I bring up the fact that I'm having thoughts of self-harm, right? Or if I'm having thoughts of suicidal ideation, I know that my parents are going to do these things. They're not going to freak out and reject me over it, right? Because the fear just kind of can come in sometimes. And because as guardians and parents and caregivers, we can be very protective of our children. But when the source of the threat is not something external, right? So we can be very protective of our children if it comes to like walking in the woods and in the West, right? We go, stay close to us. I have bear spray, right? We can be very protective of our children in that way when there's an identified threat. It makes it a lot easier. And we go, oh, my babies, right? However, when the identified threat, when it comes to suicidal ideation, the identified threat feels like it's the child themselves. That can be very, very difficult for that interaction and that family communication, because now the child is the identified threat, right, of the child. And so it can be so hard for the parents to and guardians to disassociate the two and say, no, I'm still doing protective action for my child, and my child is not the threat. My child is not the enemy. These thoughts and feelings, right, that they're having, the symptomology, that's the identified threat of suicide. It's not my child. Being able to differentiate that out allows us as caregivers to do that work that's necessary, talking to them about it, asking questions, right? Providing resources without attacking the source of the threat as the child. So I think it is so, so important. I love it. And I love the different examples of the warning signs. Can you give some, maybe some examples, like maybe some real life examples of what we might see in terms of these warning signs?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, when I was working with my clients on this, I would note their own warning signs and talk to them about that. And so I have a couple clients that like to sleep a lot. And so I would say, like, your sleeping is really abnormal right now. Like, you are sleeping way more than you used to. Like, can we talk about this? Like, what's going on? Are you struggling with anything? As well as like fear of becoming a burden. As you get into high school, you realize how independent you have to be and how you no longer may need your parents for something. And so when you do need something from them, you may feel like you're asking too much, or for your friends and stuff, if you're kind of being emotional with them. And some people don't know how to accept emotions and how to talk about them. And so you may feel like you're a burden when they're not interacting with you about your emotions, or you feel something that you want to talk about. So I always noted that because I do have a couple clients that are freshmen this year in high school. And so it's a different ball game than being in middle school. You do have more freedom, as well as acknowledging this with the parents and letting them know, like, your child wants more freedom. It's just how it goes. Like, when you think back to when you were in high school, you wanted more freedom, and talking about that with the parents and kind of finding a middle ground so that they understood where there might be struggles with it. And there will be struggles. There will be struggles. And so, as well as, a sudden uplift in mood without a reason. This was something I questioned my clients about. Like, why do you think they have like a crazy uplift in mood and they'd be like, I don't know, maybe they feel better all of a sudden. I'm like, kind of, that's kind of the idea, but more so the fact that they have found a way to relieve their pain and they are excited about that. So before they go, they get that sudden uplift in mood. And so talking about what that might look like and breaking that down with my clients. The biggest thing about the communication and the warning signs about this is knowing the other person and knowing what is normal for them and what's abnormal for them. And so having them also change that and turn that back to me and be like, well, you look really tired today. Are you okay? Like yesterday, I am battling a cold and my client literally said to me, you have bags under your eyes. And I was like, yes, I do. You're not wrong. And he's like, they're really dark. And I was like, yes, I know. Thank you. Thank you for the reminder that I'm exhausted right now. And so like, that's something that my clients like notice. Like, what if I was struggling through something, and just having him notice those things, like, oh, okay, I am looking different to other people. And so when it comes to what it may look like normally, think about your significant others, think about your friends, think about your family, think about what you know about them on a regular basis and what has changed in their maybe routines or changed in their communication with you. Do you talk to your family every day and then all of a sudden you're not talking to them as much? Or your friend, maybe you have distance, life goes on, people have different things going on, but have you noticed something really different with your friend from a distance? So acknowledging those things and acknowledging that it's a major change and increase in that behavior that makes it a warning sign. And so I think the biggest thing is taking what you know from a client or a person in your life and applying that to be, is it something that has increased? Should I be concerned?
Well, and I mean, talking about connection, how validating is it when somebody goes, you usually seem like pretty energetic in the mornings, and like lately you've seemed very like you're having a hard time like maintaining that energy in the mornings, right? And sometimes we don't say those things to other people. Like, I love your client example because like kids will say whatever they think, right? Which is great. And as adults, we need more of that sometimes, right? And so when somebody says to us, like, man, you look tired, that can feel that can feel like, oh man, that's kind of insulting. But when we really think about it, how validating is it that child saying that to us is their attempt, they're reaching out with connection because they're saying, look, I know you. So, if I don't know Chrissa, right? And I go, oh, I see her do something, I might just think that's totally normal, right? But because I know her, if I see something happen, I go, oh, that's not like her, right? I've known her for 12 years. Like, that's not like her. Something's up, right? And so it's a compliment when we hear those things from other people. And so if we can, like the steps say, take a breath, go in directly, right? That can help us to fight against the conditioning that we all have that says, don't say that to people, right? Like, don't say that to Chrissa. Like, you seem really tired. What's it like? Or like, oh man, you were snappy at me yesterday, right? Like, our conditioning says, don't say that stuff. It's not polite, right? That's not how you build connection. But really, it is how you build connection, because you can say, like, if I say to my daughter, like, oh my gosh, you're yelling at me right now. What is happening, right? Because she's not usually yelling at me. And so when she is yelling at me, like, something's up. Whereas if I go babysit a kid and they're yelling the whole time, I might be like, oh, that's good. Maybe that's just how he is, right? So it is such a compliment and such a validation to identify those things to somebody, those warning signs, and have that open door of like, yeah, I'm not telling you you're yelling at me right now so that I can like shame you about yelling at me or scold you about it. Like, I'm saying that to you. And, using my daughter as an example, like half the time she doesn't know she's doing it, right? And she'll be like, oh, am I yelling? Yeah, you are. And then I'm bringing it up because I want to know why. I want to know what is going on and give her that option to express it. And that's exactly what you're helping people to understand with these slides and these resources. So I think it's fantastic. That 988 number, putting that in a phone, just saving it as a phone number, because and the text line as well. The text line is so great to put into our phones, and just that way we know when or if that happens to ourselves or somebody else, we have that number right away. We don't have to go looking for it. And that text line can be so helpful if it's like, I don't want to talk to somebody about this, right? But I can text somebody. Wonderful, wonderful resources. Also the 988 song. So if you go on YouTube and you look up 988 song, there is a song and everybody goes like, what are those jingles that are like cars for kids, right? 1877 cars for those jingles stick with us. We know those phone numbers, right? But like 1-800 cash now or whatever, right? That like, I need my money now or whatever. Right. So like we kind of remember those phone numbers. There's a song on YouTube of the 988 and of the suicide prevention lifeline phone number. It's kind of catchy, gets in your head, right? So great resources there as well. Wonderful. So Brianna, we would love to ask you, what is something that if somebody is on the fence about starting counseling, say it's a guardian who has a child or a child that they're caretaking for, and they're like, I'd like to have some of these tools, right? The tools that you talked about, the coping tools, the safety planning. I want that for my child. I don't know how to give it to them. But maybe they're on the fence about starting it, right? This person's going to be in my house, right? That means I have to clean up that day, right? All of that. So what suggestion might you give to that person who's maybe on the fence about starting?
The advice I would give is that this field can be very overwhelming. You are taking on a lot of personal lives and what these people are going through. And I think the most rewarding part of it, though, is that bond you get to build with the other people you're working with. I mean, just in regards to this company, I love this company. If you want to work for Heart and Solutions, I'm gonna push it, and I will help you get started. Actually, I could hire you now that I'm a supervisor. That's a little side note there. But I get to sit here with Julie and Chrissa, and I don't feel like, they're my superiors. They are my superiors, but I don't feel like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? What am I going to say wrong? I feel comfortable. And that is a huge part of being in this job and at Heart and Solutions, as well as getting to build those bonds with your clients, their families. I love checking in on my families and being like, hey, how was your weekend? Like, what'd you do? And then they'll remind me that they did something, or I will tell them like, oh, how was the book fair? What did you guys do at Bloomsbury this weekend? And so getting to build those bonds is so rewarding, because eventually you do have your clients open up and they get comfortable with you and they're telling you things that maybe they've never told anyone. And so that is the most rewarding. And we have the rule where you're not allowed to hug your clients. They have to hug you first. Last week, I received 2 hugs from my clients that I've never gotten a hug from before. And that was so rewarding because last week was a really bad week in my personal life. And so I got those 2 hugs and I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm making a difference. Even though I have my own struggles, I am helping these clients through something that they're going through. And so that's the most important part of this job. And I think the most rewarding, and it makes it worth, going through different hoops and struggles. 'Cause it's not easy. There's no easy thing in life. So, things may come easy, but that doesn't mean they're easy. And so I think that would be my advice for somebody who is pursuing or wanting to pursue this field, because it can be a very, very difficult field to work through. You may have some very hard clients or some struggles that they're going through that is hard to work through, but using your resources and helping them the best way you think you can and know how you can, and that's always rewarding, as being able to be there for someone else. So yeah.
Awesome. You're great. You're going to be a great supervisor and you're a great provider.
We've been chatting each other the whole time. She's amazing.
She's so great. Thank you so much for being here. If you are listening and you are interested in BHIS services with Brianna or working for Brianna now that she's a supervisor, well, you can reach us at 1-800-531-4236 or our website, heartandsolutions.net, to get started.
Okay, I am Brianna Banowetz, and I need a counselor.
Awesome. And I'm Chrissa Hunt.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
And so do you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the You Need a Counselor podcast. We are so grateful that you're here. Now, we want to hear from you. Text us or give us a call at 515-650-3231. You can also find and connect with You Need a Counselor on Facebook and Instagram. If you've enjoyed today's show, please take a moment to like, review, or leave a comment, as all of these things help others to find and benefit from the podcast as well. If you're in the state of Iowa and interested in mental health counseling or behavioral health intervention services, give us a call at 800-531-4236.